hit it off. I'm not even gonna intro or nothing. I want you guys to just hit it right, take it home.
Welcome everybody to CGR episode 24. This is going to be an amazing episode, and I'm here with Hector, Hexzilla, Maddie Time. How you guys doing? So we're going to get straight into the Final Fantasy VII remake review discussion. I don't know if we're going to be like doing a full review or just more like a discussion, so I just put both of them in the title and the description.
Probably
So
be a little bit both.
yeah, so let's get right into it. We're not going to talk about what we're playing, what we're doing. I feel like this is going to be a long enough episode where we just talk about Final Fantasy VII. So the game came out on April 10th, and if you were lucky enough to get it early, that's good for you, but we didn't, so it took us a little longer than we thought to beat it. I beat it in 34 hours. Maddie Time, how long did it take you to beat it?
42, but I did every quest, and I also fell asleep a few times playing it, so.
And Hector felt overwhelmed, so he just didn't even get it.
Yep.
So he's gonna be the.
Oh, by the way, I just want to say, for everyone watching, if you're a veteran Final Fantasy player, I'm looking at this at a perspective of never playing. I mean, I played this one, the original, for like 30 minutes. That's the most experience that I have with Final Fantasy. So a lot of this conversation is gonna be. I have played it. I don't know if I told you. Like literally 30 minutes
not even
of it.
scratching the surface.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be a lot of that, but it should be dope. It's gonna be dope.
All right, so we're gonna get straight into gameplay. So we're gonna try not to do a lot of spoilers, but I think we may have to do some spoilers in the story section. So we're gonna do that last, so you guys can have a good decent amount of the episode where you don't have to worry about spoilers. So Maddie Time, what are your first impressions? What do you think about the gameplay when on your experience? Because you're more of a Final Fantasy guy than I am.
Oh yeah, it's my favorite. It's my favorite thing. I could go as far to say Final Fantasy is the closest thing I have to a religion.
That's deep.
It is deep.
Deep.
It was all right. The things that stand out for me were the things that frustrated me more than anything, as opposed to like it's hard. It's actually hard for me to remember what I liked about the actual gameplay and combat mechanics, which I did. But all I can think about is the things that annoyed the crap out of me. And the biggest thing about that is, they tried to merge the turn-based, like menu system type stuff with more action-y type fighting,
Right.
which worked really well in Final Fantasy 15. I thought that was a really smooth combination of those things. Although, if you play 15, I forget. Did you play 15?
I played it for a good 3 to 4 hours of it.
Okay,
There's some stuff that annoyed me on the game.
It's worth going back, especially if you only played it when it first came out, because they redid some stuff. Anyway, one thing that made it much more fluid in 15 is they pretty much took out magic from the game. Magic is pretty fundamental to most Final Fantasy games, and it's there in 15, but you use items to throw magic, and you can pretty much get through the game with a few exceptions without even thinking about that. That wasn't the case with 7. So magic is just as you use magic in very similar ways you did in the original version of 7.
Right.
But you still have to move around and dodge. And what drives me nuts, like I know it's just more of a challenge, but it became tedious at times. And that's the word I'm going to say a lot when it comes to things I didn't like about this. Even though overall I loved it. Like I'm glad I played it. It was great. I have a lot to say about it. But of the 5% of things that I didn't like about it, they stand out so much. And there were so many things in the game that were painful. Like I could feel my muscles getting tense, and I wanted to throw my controller through my TV because it was just obnoxious. And using magic in the game is one of them, because you can get interrupted while you're trying to cast. And it drives you up the fucking wall, especially if you're about to die and you cast Curaga and you use all your magic points and you get interrupted. You lose your magic points. They're gone. And the spell doesn't get cast. And like I know that's just one more thing you have to think about when you're playing. It's part of the tactics of it, but it was annoying to the point where it started making some battles not fun, and that's bad. That's bad if you're not having fun during part of the game.
Which is the battle system in the original was one of the main fun parts of the game for
Yeah,
me.
but it was classic turn-based,
Well, right.
art
Yeah, I
style.
know that. So
my thing is with the, because I've seen you play. I've also seen a lot of gameplay of it. Now I'm not much of a turn-based player,
Mhm.
but do you think that they, like, looking back at the first one and then implementing this new fighting style, how do you think it was executed in this game? As people that veteran players, and you played all of them, you played most of them, and you've got experience with it. How do you think the combat was in this one? And did they keep with the roots of the original as far as, like, the combat?
Well, it still had a similar, menu-based thing when you use like magic and items and stuff. And when you do, the game pretty much pauses while you're doing that, so you can make your selection. So it still retains some of the tactics. It's interesting how the whole system for using magic spells and how you, for people who know Final Fantasy, I'm talking about materia, but for you, it's the way you get magic spells in the game and how you get them, make them more powerful. And you collect items and you attach them into your weapons. And if you have like a fire materia and you use, the more you win battles with it, it'll get points to level up, and then you get 3 levels of fire spells. And that's all they translated, like just took it right out of the original and plugged it into this game. And it's interesting how fluidly it just works. And they also worked in a bunch of stuff. So they have like the magic system and the tactics that are related to that, and like elemental so if you say you're fighting an ice monster, you'll do more damage to it if you use fire.
Right.
But if you cast ice on it, you'll heal it.
Okay.
So
yeah.
there's stuff like that, right? And that's all there. So it's got that from Final Fantasy VII, and all of the originals all the way up till 9 had that going on, and 10. And then it also used some of the combat that was very similar to the most recent one, 15, where you are controlling one character and you go around and you hold down the attack button and the character will attack. Then you can make selections to modify what's going on by doing magic or changing weapons or doing stuff like that. And then they incorporated a system from the trilogy of Final Fantasy 13 games. So with 13, they made 13, 13-2, and then a game called Lightning Returns, which was 13-3. And this game, Final Fantasy VII Remake, played a lot like Lightning Returns. Like, so much about this game felt like Lightning Returns. The combat system felt very similar. Even the way Cloud switches between operator mode and Punisher mode, that felt a lot more like switching paradigms in the 13 games. And the way those games work, right, is when you're playing Final Fantasy games or any a lot of fantasy games or MMOs, right? Maybe some games you've played, you have different types of characters, right? So you have like the damage dealer who does the most damage.
Lord of the Rings. Yeah,
but in video games, someone who's like a damage dealer, so they do a ton of damage, but maybe they have really weak defense and they need to constantly be healed. You have someone who's a tank who does a slow but sturdy amount of damage, but they have strong defense, so they can take the damage. And you have somebody who casts magic spells, and somebody who heals, and maybe somebody who uses items or magic to modify how the battle works, and that's how it works. So Final Fantasy games usually have that type of thing. You have a damage dealer and a tank and a magic caster. In the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy, they use something called paradigms, and a lot of the game played itself, right? And what you would do is you would set things up, and they were all called weird names like Commando and Sentinel and stuff like that. So you'd have it set up so one character was your damage dealer and one character was your healer, et cetera, and they would operate automatically, and you would switch paradigms in battle and rapidly switch it up. So suddenly now your damage dealer person becomes a healer, and you have to know how the tactics are going to play out while you rapidly switch between them. So with the main character in Final Fantasy VII Remake,
which is Cloud, right?
Which is Cloud, yeah. He has a very, very simple version of that where he switches between operator mode and Punisher mode. And operator mode is like a damage dealing mode. Or it was like you can do a lot of fast attacks and move around very quickly, but you do less damage. And then Punisher mode, where you can only move, like take slow steps, and you attack much more slowly, but you do a ton of damage.
Right.
So it has all this stuff. There's also a mechanic called staggering, which was straight from 13. Where sometimes
where it's something in the line of your enemies are like staggered and you get more damage.
Yeah.
When you hit them.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
And a lot of enemies take almost no damage until you stagger them. So you have to wear them down until they're like, oh, and then you can do a bunch of damage.
Yep.
And the 13 trilogy of games, that was also amazing.
So that's not a common thing with all of the games.
It was only 13 games. And they took.
Is that because of the combat, like the combat gameplay, like with the mechanics of the combat?
Yeah. So after Final Fantasy X, which was turn-based, but it had its own way of speeding it up. They were trying to be like, okay, how do we do turn-based combat but keep the pace up with battles? And people are, especially in the West, are more used to action games. So they started doing different things to speed things up or make them more action-oriented.
Right. Yep.
So the staggering mechanic and switching paradigms and having the characters around you control themselves were all things to make it go faster, so you could still run into battle and button mash and attack a creature, but also retain some of the tactics from the turn-based system in the older. And this is just everything all smushed together, and it mostly works, but it's annoying, and that's my point. Hopefully, do you kind of get anything?
I understand, yeah,
okay.
And I've seen you fight an enemy that was staggered.
Yeah.
So I've seen you do that, and it does deal a lot of damage, and I can see how, like, with the whole Final Fantasy, the way that it works is so tactical that you want to make sure you're, getting as much damage as you can and things like that, and really planning out your moves. I think that's for me as someone who doesn't even know Final Fantasy play like that, I think that's probably the most appealing is how tactical the gameplay is, because I love tactical gameplay. I love time management and tactical gameplay where you have to, it's kind of like Doom. You can't just shoot an enemy and it's going to be the same damage with the same guns, or, you know what I'm saying? You have to choose your weapons. You have to choose how you shoot them, where you shoot them. And there's so many mechanics to it. I love those type of things. So
Yeah. So there's times you'll attack an enemy. If you're just attacking it, nothing happens.
Right.
So you have to and there's a combination of all these different tactics, both, what types of attacks characters can do, what your, for lack of a better term, what out your magic spells. And some of those items, the materia that gives you magic spells, they're not always just magic spells. They're, abilities and different things. So you're sort of changing what you can and can't do in a battle.
Yep.
So you have to figure that out, and then you have to, figure your tactics out on the fly. So there's so much thinking, and it's fun, but it's fucking annoying when you figure out, like, okay, I need to bomb this guy with fire magic. So you go to cast your most expensive fire spell, and you get interrupted, and you lose your magic points. I don't like it.
How many times has that happened to both of you in your time playing?
In this,
would you say, yeah?
In this one?
In this one.
Yeah, it would depend on the fight. It would be one or two boss battles where it would happen a bunch.
So it was very annoying. It's one of those things, like...
Overall, like, over the course of the game, not that annoying. But those few moments where it became annoying stand out so strongly. Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to move on from the combat system because we've just ranted for 15 minutes about it. But the other thing I didn't like, right? I can't stand, I almost get like a full-on panic attack, and I think a lot of people do too, when any video game takes away your control, right? So, it's super annoying when you try and play like a modern platformer, and it's like, oh, let's walk you through the tutorial, and you can't fucking control the guy.
Right.
Yeah. So it's super, super annoying when you're like running freely around and then suddenly you can't.
Right.
So there's a bunch of times in this one, like...
Or I hate when they put a screen up and you have to press A to continue or whatever, because they want you to learn whatever it is they're trying to get you to learn, instead of you just going with it.
Right.
You know what I'm
right.
saying?
So there's a little bit of that, but what they did a ton of in this is like there's parts where you're walking through and you have to like bend down and go under something, or you have to press up against the wall to squeeze through a crack.
One of those, yeah, it's typical,
Well, here's the thing, right? You don't actually. It's not like Tomb Raider where you have to perform a move to do any of that. You just walk over to the space where you're supposed to crouch down or whatever, and there'll be an arrow on the ground,
right?
And you just walk over to it and you just do it.
Yeah, I've seen that in the gameplay a lot.
But you slow the fuck down a ton. So you're like running around and suddenly you just have to wait for Cloud to inch his way past some fallen over beams in an alleyway. And then there's other times where the game is just like, oh no, you have to walk right now. It's usually leading up to like a cutscene or a boss battle. But you'll be running around freely and then suddenly you get your stick pushed all the way and you just are like walking really slowly, baby steps. And there's a whole bunch of times throughout the game where it does that, or if you bump into another character, it'll slow you down, or sometimes it'll want you to look at something, so it takes away the camera control.
Oh, I hate that. That's my biggest thing.
And it's I understand.
As in, like, you're playing and the camera automatically zooms at something else or looks at something else.
It'll lock to a certain direction so that you see.
Right, and you can only move with that camera view.
And usually when it does that, it also restricts you from moving quickly.
Okay.
So it locks the camera down and you're stuck walking really slowly.
Right.
And this only happens a dozen times in the game.
But they're so significant that it sticks out for you guys.
It's so tedious when it happens.
Right.
That it's like all I can remember about playing it are these handful of moments where the game is just like, nope, slow down. You gotta walk. You gotta crawl through this air duct, and it's gonna take 5 minutes. And you just gotta go slow, and it makes it tedious. And a game shouldn't be tedious.
Right.
Now,
it should be have a good pacing.
What I think was happening is they're just trying to load the next area, but they need to do a better job.
That can be part of it, but there's other parts that are tedious. So like, I know we haven't crossed the line of spoilers yet, but near the end of the game. When you're in the area is called the drum. Do you know what I'm talking about? And you get to the point where in the original, right? The original, you get to this spot in the game, and the character's like, "Oh shit, that's creepy. We got to get the fuck out of here." And they get the fuck out of there. It lasts 2 minutes, and off they go to the office in the top of the building for the next scene. In this one. You get to that point, they're like, oh, this is creepy. And then the bridge you're on gets cut out, and you have to spend the next hour and a half of your fucking life doing this obnoxious puzzle to get out of this thing. And it's not even just obnoxious because of what you have to do. There's literally a guy in the game who's like, well, since you're here, I'm going to put you through a little experiment.
Right.
And it's just...
You know what that reminds me of, Gary? In Far Cry 5, when you're in a certain map, and then the fucking little mini game comes up or whatever, like that.
Or when they just abduct you, and they want you to like, do like that puzzle.
They tranquilize you, and you have no control, and you go into this stupid fucking level that nobody wants to play.
Oh,
and you're forced to play.
They actually did it in Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah,
it's the one part of Final Fantasy 15 that everyone fucking hates. So
where you don't even want to play it. Like, why would you?
Right, exactly. So there's a part near the end of 15 where you get this ring that insta kills anything, right? Which is cool. Except
insta kills always cool.
Except your ankle's broken, so you're limping around through this entire level, just taking baby steps, and it is awful. So this felt like the same thing where they just added this whole long puzzle to this part of the level that did nothing except draw the gameplay time out by like 2 obnoxious hours where you're like, I know what happens next in the story because of the original. Right. I want to get there. Let me get up to the elevator. But like, nope, you gotta solve a puzzle. And it's not even a real puzzle because they removed any actual puzzles from the game. It's just like, hey, you need to go up there and hit this switch. so that you can open up the pathway for this other character to hit this other switch. And then when they hit that other switch, you can go and hit a third switch, which sounds like a puzzle, but you don't have to figure any of that out. It just walks you through it.
Right.
There's no like different ways you can go. You're just straight line.
Straight line. And I was going to say, because you bring it up how, like, what's going to happen. So you just want to get to that point. How accurate is the game, like, from the original to what it is now? Like, how accurate is it to the point where, like, because I'm imagining me playing Last of Us 10 years ago and then they remaster it now. And I'm just like, okay, I know what happens. Let's get to it, where it kind of takes you out of the immersion of the game. How often does that happen with these levels? Is it pretty kind of like accurate where it's a good pace and,
So we have to get into spoilers if we're going to talk about
Yeah,
any of
so
that.
I'm thinking we should talk about that in the story section.
Well, I don't know. I think I've ranted about.
Well, you only rant about the things you hate. There's a lot of good stuff about the game too.
Right, and we'll get to the good, but I want to knock out the bad because I feel like those are so insignificant to the actual game being as good as it was that we can always leave on a good note.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so we'll talk about that when we get to the story. But I do want to put a little cliff note right there, like just because I'm just curious, like how accurate was the game? You know what I mean?
The
From
game
then and now.
We can't even compare them without getting into spoilers.
Yes.
It there were lots of it where it was like, oh yeah, I remember it. I feel like it's a much more cinematic, fully voice acted version.
Well, not in that sense. Let's put it in the sense of environment, levels, the places you're in, like the levels you're in, are they the same? How many different areas are there?
It's good. The very nature, the very existence of those differences is a spoiler.
Okay.
So
yeah.
So, dude, if you want to talk about any other thing you want before we get into the story, because I enjoyed it. I don't have anything else to say. Everything was good. The game was good. Played fine, except for everything I just said.
Right, and you hit the nail on the head on that part. As far as the actual gameplay and the movement and everything, I do like the fact that everything's voice acted, because a lot of the Japanese games today have a select few cutscenes that are voice acted, and you still have to read it. And there's cutscenes in like 3 different engines. You get like the full rendered cutscenes, you get the in-engine cutscenes, or you get the text cutscenes. But in this game, everything's voice acted, even the random NPCs you meet.
Did you have any issues hearing the voices in the game?
Oh yeah, which is I think everyone did too.
That was driving me fucking nuts, because you'd be in the middle of a cutscene and then suddenly somebody's voice would just fade away and you couldn't hear what they were saying.
Oh, I didn't have that part, but I'm talking about like walking in a random town.
I don't like that in real life.
No, I'm talking about like main characters' voices. And this was another reason why it took me, like, I needed an extra day or so to finish the game.
Mm-hmm.
Main characters' voices, like in the middle of a cutscene, it would just disappear into the background as if the game thought they were walking away from the camera, and you couldn't understand what they were saying. It was awful. And I went online trying to be like, okay, anyone have this problem? I found one post on Reddit where somebody playing the demo had the same problem, and their solution was to uninstall the game and reinstall it, and that fixed it for them. So I did that. The thing is uninstalling it and re-downloading it only took an hour, but for the game to actually install took all day. I lost an entire day waiting for I couldn't play the game all day, and I went to
took you to load the game to get it in. Or
the second time.
Okay.
Because I pre-ordered it and the game downloaded in the background before that, so I could play it the minute it went live.
Yeah.
But on day 3 or whatever, I was like, fuck this. I was looking up the solution. I uninstalled it and then reinstalled it, which, like, on the PlayStation side only took an hour to download it and the game started up. But then when you went to like open the save file, it was like, you have to wait for the game to install 1%. And then I went back 10 minutes later and it was like 3%.
Damn, yeah.
I ended up waiting all day and just went to sleep. And the next day it played. So I lost a whole day because and it didn't solve the problem either.
No, still had the audio.
Still had the same problem.
I guess you just had to deal with it.
I mean, it's one of those things. I think every game has a flaw where it's an actual like game flaw or like a glitch kind of. I would assume that would be a glitch or something that they just need to fix where you can't hear the audio as well. But yeah, I think that's game for play. So G Mills, you said that for you, there was a lot of bad and a lot of good. What are some other bad negatives of the gameplay you could think about, if any? Kind of to what Matt was saying. I mean,
See, Matt hit the nail on the head with the bad stuff. I do like how there's park benches throughout the game where you kind of realize, okay, something big's coming up. So
okay.
there's a park bench and a convenience. I mean, and a vending machine conveniently placed there, so you kind of have an idea of you need to prepare.
Did you notice what the logo was on the benches in the later part of the game?
No.
So in the early part of the game, the benches just have an advertisement for the vending machine. It says potion on them.
Mm-hmm.
But later in the game, and I first noticed it when I was trying to climb up from the slums.
Mm-hmm.
The logo on the benches is that sort of hook shaped question mark thing that was the save points in the original.
Oh, okay.
Just a little Easter egg.
A little Easter egg for you.
Also, okay. I really want to get into like the story and stuff. And
I know you're ready for the story.
I know you're itching
about that one.
So, but did you notice the big sort of fan theory confirmation Easter egg when you go into the Shinra Museum?
Are you talking about where they kind of like gave you a glimpse of the Spira?
Not Spira. No.
Or the Final Fantasy X universe type deal?
Yeah, so in Final Fantasy X-2, there's a character called Shinra. And
okay. See, I haven't played 10-2, so I don't know. Like, I didn't know.
Okay, so did you play 10?
I played 10, but I don't remember too much of 10. It was kind of a long time ago.
That's okay. So do you remember how in 10 there was, Riku, one of the girls with the reddish hair? She was part of a group called the All Bed,
Mm-hmm.
who used technology.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then in 10-2, there's a young boy from part of the All Bed, but you never see his face. He wears like a hazmat suit and this gas mask thing, and his name is Shinra, and he collects data about like the pyre flies, which is very similar to the life stream in Final Fantasy VII. And there's a part later in the game where he says that he has a theory about how to harvest the life energy to create electricity. So it's like, okay, there's some connection there. And then the scenario writer, Kajami? I don't know if I'm saying the name right, but he said, oh yeah, he somehow leaves Spira someday and goes to Gaia, which is the planet of Final Fantasy VII, and starts Shinra. That's probably what happens, but maybe we'll explore it someday. So, when you're in...
Shut up, dogs.
Those dogs are birds.
Pretty sure it's dogs.
So when you're in the when you're in the Shinra, you remember you have to take the tour?
Mm-hmm.
In the first room there's you see like exhibits, and you see a photo, and it's like an old sepia monochrome photo of what is ostensibly the first employees of the Shinra Corporation. It's people in rows in a chair, in rows of chairs, sort of posing for a corporate photo. And in the center of the photo is an adult in a suit, like a business suit, but on his face he's wearing the same exact gas mask as Shinra.
As everyone nowadays.
As Shinra from Final Fantasy X-2, confirming that there's like a connection between the two. And if they use that theory that there was like some space travel involved, that's fine. But I actually, since they're expanding the world so much and like showing things at a much more granular detail, I have my own theory. And I think that since Spira wasn't a planet, it was a continent, right? It was a country, sort of. You never get to explore the globe in 10. You just explore the land of Spira from north to south. It's loosely based off Japan. Well, there's a place in in Final Fantasy VII that's loosely based off of Asian culture, that loosely has the same, north to south archipelago location. And if they were to expand the amount of detail in it in the remake, they could make the Wutai continent be Spira. That's my fan theory, is that
Lost me at
you have no idea what we're talking
Yeah.
about. That's my fan theory, is that Spira is not a planet, but it's just the continent, and that in the future of that same planet, Spira becomes Wutai, and I like that connection a lot better. Anyway, if you want to start, we can get into the story,
this motherfucking story of this.
Spoilers and that sort of thing. Because
Yeah, I think we should.
Hold on.
What?
Before the story, I want to hear from both of you, okay? Because this shit is. I always like to do this shit because I love seeing. Because I always tell Gary, this can be a really epic fail, or it can be an okay game, or it can be really amazing. I feel like there's no in between with remakes.
Mhm.
And I use that reference with like Resident Evil, and I loved Resident Evil. I think they did justice to that game. But original Final Fantasy. What did you love about it, and what made it the game that it was? What made it so notable? And then looking at this one, like, do you think that it did justice to the original one in the story? And then I want to know
when you say original, the original Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, the remake, right?
Mm-hmm.
As far as that goes, because you guys said there is a lot of different things, and it's hard to really pinpoint that. But like, just the remake, because it is a remake, and they advertise it as a remake of that game, right? How do you think that did? What made you love the original, and how do you think it did
They
now?
took my favorite part of the original game and made it into its entire whole game. Because
because you're talking about the factory.
The
the
Midgard.
fucking
I really like the Midgard part of
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII,
Yeah,
and they made it in its entire
city,
game.
right?
Yeah.
You know what's interesting?
Hmm.
The first time I played Final Fantasy VII, way back when it first came out, Christmas of '97, right?
97,
Right?
good old days when viruses weren't as bad as they are.
And I didn't know anything about it. I had played the previous 3 games that had come out in America. I was already a fan, but anything I had seen for advertising or even like the pictures on the package were just Midgar.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, how are they going to do this game in 3D? Oh, I get it. It's all set in one big city. You can't leave the city. That's how you get, a world map in 3D. It's just in a city. That's what I thought the game was. And that's what I was hoping that the remake was going to be. I was hoping for a fully explorable Midgar. And I was a little disappointed that you just keep running around the 3 slums over and over again, but whatever.
Yeah.
But so when you get to that point at the end of Disc 1 in the original, and you leave Midgar, and suddenly, the grass is green and the sky is blue, that blew my mind, because I didn't have any expectations when I played it the first time. So when you finally leave the city and you get out on the world map, I was like, whoa, okay, it is like another Final Fantasy game. It kind of blew my mind. I don't know, just a fun fact. But so I had compared this to something in Star Trek. And you guys, I've asked you earlier, and I asked you Star Trek, and you guys don't really know Star Trek, but in 2008 or 9, whenever it was, they did a reboot of Star Trek. They did a trilogy of these movies with a new cast playing the characters from the 60s, right? But what the plot was of the first reboot, it seemed like it was a reboot. But you most people know who Spock is, the guy with the pointy ears. He's like the most famous character from Star Trek. There's a point in the reboot movie where Captain Kirk, he can't get along with Spock, and Spock kicks him off the ship. And so Captain Kirk gets stuck on this planet, and lo and behold, who does he encounter on this planet but Spock as an old man, played by the original actor who played him in the 60s and in the movies, Leonard Nimoy. Rest in peace. And
Rest in peace to Leonard. That guy.
and what it turned what it turned out is the villain movie, even though it was a reboot set before the original show even started, the villain was from the future, from after all the other Star Trek, and he came back in time to get revenge on people. And Spock came with him, and what it said was, okay, so yeah, this is
right,
but since this villain and Spock come from the future, they come from like the original version. It's the original Spock. It's the same Spock who was in the old TV shows and the movies. He's gone back in time, and they've created this new timeline, this new universe,
right,
parallel universe that is a reboot, but also a sequel. And that's what Final Fantasy did.
Mm-hmm. Did you expect it?
As soon as Sephiroth showed up in the beginning, so Sephiroth doesn't show up until way far into the game,
Mm-hmm.
even though you're like just right behind the door from him in the Shinra building, and now they changed it so all the stuff that you see the evidence of him doing, like the blood on the floor and stuff, and you're like, oh, Sephiroth was just here. He carried a creature across the floor and he just killed the president.
Mm-hmm.
Now the characters are present for it because things are a little different. But when Sephiroth first shows up in the beginning of the game, it's in the first. It's right after the bombing mission, right? And he talks as if he has foreknowledge of what's going on, because in the original, Sephiroth doesn't know who Cloud is. He doesn't care. He has no knowledge of Cloud until Cloud gets in his way. But in this one, Sephiroth, not only does he show up a bunch of times, but he knows who Cloud is. He knows the connection between the two. And the other thing is, when you fight him at the end, he shows up with the Black Wing. He doesn't have that, even though we think of that being like an iconic design, right? Sephiroth, Black Wing coming out of the back.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't look like that in the original game. He only looks like that in Advent Children, sequel to the game.
Mm-hmm.
And when I fought him, it just looked like I was watching Advent Children, to be honest with you.
Right. It's almost as if it's deliberately evocative of that final battle in Advent Children where Midgar is falling apart. Because what's happening at the end in like that meta universe you have the final battle in is
Mm-hmm.
pieces of Midgar flying around. It's referencing Advent Children.
Mm-hmm.
And Sephiroth seems to know what's going on. And he's talking about changing destiny and all this other stuff, right? And then Cloud starts gripping his head, and he's like, whatever. And some of those times line up with when his memory is getting fucked with because he's confusing his own life with Zack's life.
Mm-hmm.
But there's other times where he grips his head and he has these premonitions, and he sees Aerith dying, even though they obscure it, so there's no spoilers for new players. Like you see the body floating in the water. You see the materia, the holy materia, after she uses it, bouncing down the rocks, just like in the original game. So Cloud has these flashes of the future that he shouldn't have, because that's not even remotely part of the game. And then there's the existence of Whisper, arbiters of fate, who keep showing up whenever something goes differently than in the original game.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start thinking about it seems random when they show up, but the first time they show up is when Cloud sees Aerith.
Mm-hmm.
In the original game, he just bumps into Aerith, and that's how they completely accidental. But in this one, he walks out into the road, and you're the player, but you're just walking along. There's no whatsoever that they're going to bump into each other, and instead, Cloud sees Aerith freaking out because the Whispers are bugging her, and that's what to meet, because they're trying to make sure that they meet.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they don't make sure that they meet, they don't meet, and the timeline changes. And then they start showing up every time that there's something that's going to change the timeline. So Sephiroth keeps fucking with stuff. He shows up when he's not supposed to. That causes things to happen slightly out of order, especially towards the end of the game when you're going up the Shinra building. Most notably, when you get into President Shinra's office, in the original game, you just find his corpse with Sephiroth's sword through it stuck to the desk. But in this one, you find the little weasel cowering, and he's hanging off the edge of the building. And he's alive, and you bring him inside, and then Sephiroth shows up, and you get to see Sephiroth kill him. You're part of those events. And then, to completely fuck with my head, Sephiroth kills Barrett.
Right?
And I was like, whoa, okay, whoa, wait.
Spoil a big thing.
We're in spoilers.
Yeah,
now.
yeah. We didn't. So Stadia Weekly 1, I know you played the original. I know you haven't played the remake, but we did warn you guys. It is spoiler, so.
Oh yeah. And people have had a week. So I was like, whoa, wait, what? No, okay. Are they gonna do it this differently? Are they gonna fucking kill Barrett? Because I had the suspicion that they might do one thing to, like, give you the option through your. I think I mentioned this at one point. Elaborating on the dating mechanic, and if you choose Tifa over Aerith for the date at the Gold Saucer, that maybe they change it so Tifa gets killed. So I was expecting them to have some sort of change like that later. So then, but when Sephiroth kills Barrett, it's like, oh wait, is this permadeath? Is he dead?
He's dead.
But that would be so different than what happens in the original. Then the Whispers show up and they just resurrect him. They just bring him right back to life. Just like Wedge survives falling from the pillar, which is a really big difference. And then the fates are bugging him, and then later at the end they drag him out a window, and I guess he dies. You don't really see if he dies or not, but they keep doing things that keep trying to correct the timeline to make it go back to the way it was in the original, as if to say what's really happening is Sephiroth has well, this is what I think is Sephiroth is post Advent Children. This is Sephiroth as we saw him at the end of Advent. He's has the abilities to come back whenever he wants, like he seems to with anyone who has the Genova. And he's done something to just travel back in time, and he's come back in time to have another go at things. Maybe he has a different agenda. Maybe he's just trying to smush the planet with a meteor. Maybe he wants more. Because why would they blow that wall? Keep showing visions of the future and showing visions of meteor blowing up everything just to tease you for future installments. It's almost as if they're trying to say that that's not the way it's going to go this time, and Sephiroth is doing something different. And the Whispers keep trying to put things back, right? But it's the whole, like, can they change it or not? And what's the one thing that absolutely did change is that Biggs survived. They just straight up, he lives at the end instead of staying dead. And Wedge might, as if they're trying to say, you can change things, and people who died, like maybe Aerith, won't die this time because this isn't really it's a sequel because of time travel. And then the other big thing is whatever the hell was going on, showing that Zack didn't die.
See, I was excited to see that cutscene again in like full HD, like up-res.
It's shot for shot the same as the end of Crisis Core.
Right. But then the Whisper started showing up.
Yeah, you see him in the background. And there was that weird thing where when the Whispers explode outside of, over Midgar, Zack somehow sees it as if whatever they did when they went through that portal changed the timeline up and down,
Yeah.
And if you notice that there's that like bag of chips that like they make a real big point that you see with the dog on it. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I probably missed over it because I was just rushing through the game.
So at the end, during the very end, when it shows this new version of Zack not dying, there's a bag of chips that floats up in front of the screen, and it goes into slow motion for just a minute. So it's like, look at this bag of chips, and it floats away. And on the bag of chips is the dog. You know the dog that's spray painted everywhere that Avalanche uses as a symbol? It's the same dog, the dog with the army hat with 4 stars on it, but it's a completely different dog. So it's like the same dog, but a completely different version of it. And I was like, that's weird. Are they trying to somehow suggest that like this change is showing that it's an alternate universe? Which I think is what they were trying to do.
Right.
Okay, so I first noticed the whispers, like obviously, with Aerith and everything. But when you wake up before the mission with this when you blow up the second reactor, because the game's, like Cloud said, I'm done with Avalanche. I'm not going on this mission, and they kick you out of the bar and everything. Then the whispers show up and totally mess with Jesse's leg.
Right, and they forced Cloud to get back on
Yeah.
track.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
that's when I noticed. I'm like, oh, okay, these guys are going to be very important later on in the game.
Right, they're course correcting things to keep things on track with the original, and in ways that only make sense if you know what the original is supposed to be.
Exactly. So if you came into this as a new player, I think you'd be more confused.
So here's another thing: when you're at the very end, remember how fight? I keep saying it's a Heartless because it looks just like the giant Heartless in Kingdom Hearts.
I didn't really get into that series, so I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, but you remember near the end when you're in like that alternate world and you see Midgar fall. Before you fight Sephiroth, you have to fight that giant Whisper, and there's the 3 smaller Whispers that you have to fight as like a proxy. If you notice, one of them has a sword, one of them has a gun for a hand, and the other one does this.
So they're just trying to imitate the 3 original characters.
No, if you use assess on them, it says in the information under assess that they are Whispers from an alternate future who have come back in time to prevent their future from being destroyed. And one of them has a sword, one has a gun, and one has martial arts.
Okay, yeah, because I noticed the characters did look familiar, but I didn't really use the assess on them during that fight.
Yeah. I was putting assess on every new creature. I was trying to fill out the
See, a lot of my times is like I always just forget about that ability.
Yeah. But if you do it again, because once you finish it, you can do chapter select. If you go back to that fight, use assess on those Whispers, and one has a sword, one has a gun hand, and one uses fisticuffs. And it says that they're Whispers from an alternate future who've come back in time to prevent their future from being destroyed, or something along those lines, as if to suggest that they are the spirits or the embodiments or just time-traveling versions of Cloud, Barret, and Tifa. Original ones were, trying to prevent their future from being destroyed. And then also, they show a brief, when they're showing those flash forwards, they show Red 13, the adult Red 13, 500 years in the future, running, like in the post-credit scene from the original game. And then Red 13 says something about like, oh, that's a vision of a bad future, as if to suggest that the original game is the timeline that they need to avoid.
You said avoid, right? Because you kind of broke up.
Yes, I did.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Like, I understood you, but I didn't know about the chat, so... Yeah, because I remember him saying, like, oh, that's what happens if we, like, if we fail or, something like that, so...
Yeah, it was as if he was suggesting that you're trying to prevent the events of original game from happening.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole conversation at the end is all around, you know, changing fate and everything. So like, what's gonna happen next? Are we even gonna play through the rest of the story? Are there gonna be 4 or 5 games that go through in detail the rest of the story, or is it gonna be just one more that just goes in a different direction? Like, well, it's from here on, when the next installment happens, it's completely unknown.
Mm-hmm.
I assume we're still gonna get those other characters.
Do
know,
you
we'll see
do
Yuffie
you
and-
think
Yuffie and-
that do you think they're just gonna go through some of the same story beats but in an alternate timeline where you can actually change?
That's what I'm kind of expecting, but I'm wondering how far it's going to change, because this game also made a big point that Shinra wants to build Neo.
Mm-hmm.
So much to the point that they showed it, like the design and everything.
Yeah.
So, like, are they going to do that? Is that going to be a whole nother thing that's going to happen later in the story? Not only do they foreshadow the events of the foreshadow stuff that couldn't possibly happen if you follow the story of the original game, and they're talking about changing fate, and there's all this evidence of different timelines and time travel and all that stuff. So the question is how far, like, is the next game just going to start off with them going to Calm and then getting a Chocobo and, you know, crossing the desert where the snake is, and then Yuffie stealing your materia, and then you meet Sid, and there's the Fort Condor. Like, if you take the way they drew out the events of this one, and if you draw out the rest of those events the same way, maybe you make it to the gold saucer. That might even be too much, you know. But if they're gonna just do a different thing entirely, like if really diverging,
Mm-hmm.
then they don't have to pace it like that. You could skip parts of the original story. You could do a whole different thing. You know, you could get yourself to a natural conclusion if it just does a different story entirely.
Right.
Which is what I think might happen.
Do you think like they'll do the different story, then they'll just show you like clips and scenes of the original, like what would have happened if we failed, you know, stuff like how they did it with Red 13?
Maybe. What I hope they do is I hope they just keep going through the original story in the same way, and then they give you the ability to save Aerith. Like, I think that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where it's all going, right? And I'd be fine, but I would actually be disappointed if they abbreviate it. If they just do one more installment or even 2 more, but it just goes to a different story that just diverts so much so that it can get to an ending without having to deal with traveling the world and doing all that stuff, you know? That's my worry, is that that's what they're going to do.
Right. And I think a lot of people are going to worry about that from the reaction that I've been getting from the ending. So I don't think a lot of people would be happy about it.
You know, it depends. If, like, Advent Children fucked with the ending of the original, right?
Mhm.
Like, just everything in Advent Children just kind of went, okay, well, here's this other aspect to it, and Sephiroth can come back. He's not really gone, and, you know, maybe he'll come back again. And it just kind of like broke up the whole point of the original. And I was fine with that because the vibe was still there and it still had that metaphysical sadness and all that sort of thing. So they could do a whole different version that still has all the things I like.
Mhm.
But I think it would be frustrating if you're just hoping for an expansion on the rest of the story the way we just got, and you never get that, you know?
Right. Yeah, well, we're just gonna have to see what happens in the next game. So let's kind of tone it back a little bit. What did you think of how they expanded Midgard into its full game? Like, how do you like how they, you know, took one screen of the original game and just made it its own gameplay section and stuff like that?
That was fine, but the ooh, sorry, horrible ringing in my ear.
Tendinitis.
Yeah, uh, the end result reminded me of Returns. You didn't play. You didn't play Lightning Returns, did you?
I started it, and I didn't like the whole 13-day concept.
So in Lightning Returns, you have three major areas of the game that you can ultimately walk between all three.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a similar scale as what we had in what we just played. So it really reminded me of that. But the areas that they used and what they expanded upon were really just based off of what was in the original. And I was really hoping for like an open world Midgard. That was what I expected. And they definitely did not do that. So it kind of had that same sort of you don't get to see the other sectors. You can't really roam freely. You're just on like these set hallways,
Mm-hmm.
which was sort of the downside of the 13 series, especially the first one, where the whole game is one long hallway.
Right.
This wasn't as bad, but it made it feel much smaller somehow, even though it was vastly expanding those areas.
Now,
You are so bored, dude, aren't you?
Am I?
Yeah,
I'm just tucking all of this up.
yeah, because you have no idea what we're talking about.
now,
Nope.
do you think they did that on purpose just to try to tell the original story a bit?
It's I don't, I can't. Okay, so 15 was a huge open world,
Yeah.
right? It was so huge they actually did themselves a disservice
Mm-hmm.
by giving the characters a car right from the beginning, because you drive everywhere in that game. And if you didn't have a car, you'd have this massive map, like this just crazy huge map that's bigger than any previous Final Fantasy game by far, that you'd spend hours walking around. Like you could actually get an old school Final Fantasy exploration experience
Right.
on a map the size of 15. So I was hoping that they were going to do that with Midgard and give you an open that you could explore, and it would be on similar scale as the world in 15. But instead, it was just long hallways like 13.
Mm-hmm.
So I I feel like they could have done the same story, but had you explore more.
Yeah, I think the only chance where you actually did explore was before you I can't remember exactly. I know you were with like Eris and Tifa before the whole plate explosion. Were you actually able to do like side missions in Sector 5, Sector 6, and
Yeah.
Sector
So,
7?
but again, you're just running back and forth.
Yeah, but like you said earlier, they're the three sectors that you've been in.
Right, which is why I compared it to Lightning Returns, because Lightning Returns was the same deal. Once you open up all three areas, it's exactly the same thing.
So, what did you think of the new missions that they add with like more of the side characters, the arena and stuff like that?
That was fine. I'm disappointed by how battles in the Coliseum, and I wonder, I assume they're still going to have the same thing when you get to the if you sir.
Is it a gold flying saucer?
No, it's a casino, like an amusement park casino.
Mm-hmm.
That is gold, and it looks like a massive tree.
Sounds like my type of place.
Yeah.
So, from what I heard, when you about to go save Aerith,
Yep.
you stay at the mom's house, and depending on your choices in the game, and what you do, you either get Tifa, Barrett, or like a flashback of Aerith. Which one did you get? Which character did you get?
A flash.
Like you can from what I heard on the internet, like you could have like a silhouette of Aerith. But in my game, I got Barrett for some reason.
When you're talking to Aerith's mom.
Yeah, like when you're at Aerith's house and Aerith is gone, then you tell her mom that you're gonna go save her, and you can't sleep, and you notice someone's outside.
Oh no, it was Aerith.
Okay, so you had Aerith, I had Barrett.
Okay, like you go outside and like talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's strange. Yeah, no, I went outside and talked. She has this whole thing where she tells Cloud, "Hey, you better not fall in love with me." You didn't get that conversation.
Sounds like every
No,
that
no, I had Barrett, like, you know how he was like, man, we need to go save her. She saved my daughter and all that, you know.
Oh
Shouldn't
wow, yeah, no, I had no idea that were optional conversations. So I guess they did do a version of the date through your choices. Yeah, no, I definitely got Aerith, and they have a really poignant conversation where he has another flash. I think he has a flash forward of the materia dropping down the rocks, and he's talking to her, and she says, "Oh, you better not fall in love with me." And then he goes, "What? Don't I get a say in this?" And then she disappears because she's like a ghost projection.
Yeah, see, I didn't get that. So, like, when you had that flash forward, I was kind of confused. I'm like, that didn't happen in my game.
There were a couple of times where he sees a flash forward of her dying.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about in that part. So, like,
Yeah.
see, I thought it was just like you just talked to Barrett, in that scene, and I watched like a ending explain type deal, and they went over that, so, and they were saying like people got different scenarios in that part.
Interesting.
So I guess I have to go back and redo the game.
I wonder if you can get different scenarios just doing the chapter select. But there is a hard mode.
Maybe, yeah.
And the hard mode seems really hard because you can't use items. But
Yeah, you should definitely go for it, or Hector should go for it.
I'd probably beat it in like 2 days.
But the thing is it says hard mode. When it at the end of the game, it explains you get hard mode, and it says you can't use items, and then it says, but certain manuscripts, whatever that means, will only be available.
The question is, can you bring your character's stats back with you in hard mode? Because if that's the case, it will kind of make it a little easier.
I know there. Oh, I don't know. I don't think it's a new game plus scenario. I think it's just hard mode. I mean, I'll find out.
Right.
What I am hoping though is, and I'll be really frustrated if they don't. I spent all that time leveling up that materia, and I was buying items that I don't need, right. I was really treating it like I'm gonna go through the rest of the story with the things I was doing. I really hope that it's a Mass Effect scenario where when you get the new one, you load your save game, and it just picks up where you left off. I'll be super disappointed if it's a Final Fantasy 13-2 scenario where it just starts off again and it's like, why don't you play as a different character this time and start from level 1?
I don't think they'll do that. I think you definitely started as the same people. Then I'm thinking you can actually use Red 13 in the second one.
Oh, certainly. Did you notice Cat Sith's little cameo? That I was surprised they bothered to put that in there at all, but they did.
Right.
On a scale of 1 through 10, what would you rate the game?
I would rate it a solid 8.
Really? I was expecting like a 9, 10.
I'd probably say an 8 or a 9 as well, but it's different because I love Final Fantasy. So even though like there's problems with it that like technically lower the score, like I explained earlier, I love it so much. It's like if you really love the Marvel and they put one out that's like, it's okay, you still love it. You're gonna watch it over and over again when you on those movies every year. That's how it is for me. Like there might be little problems.
Just finished Spider-Man.
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3.
Yeah. It's 3. Wait. Oh, the old ones. So like because it's Final Fantasy and it's not a really bad one, because there's a few difficult ones.
Mm-hmm.
Like by difficult, I mean like I don't need to play that again. Like playing Final Fantasy for the after years, they'll never do. So I love it. I love it. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm like, oh, it's 20 because it's Final Fantasy.
Yeah, I get that. I definitely am. That's how he feels about Persona. I bet.
So here's my reasoning. The game, like the narrative, I didn't mind a lot of the changes in the narrative part. I did like the fact that they expanded most of the stuff. You know, like added new missions you could do with the side characters. I really do like how they made Jesse Wiggs and Wedge and Biggs part of the story more.
Yeah.
And and they had their own side mission where you have to sneak in their parents' house and steal
and then most of them survived, which was, again, a change. But I was getting really sad. Like, oh, here's this little kid playing, and look, there's all these kids at the school, and they want to be like Cloud, and they have swords, and here's your new landlady. She's really hurt.
And they fucking die in the original.
Yeah, because this whole so like that whole city, the whole what it is it so they take one whole wedge of the city and blow up the supports and drop the whole sector on the slums below it and kill everyone. The name of the landlady was a Chrono Trigger reference.
No, I didn't really play with Chrono Trigger.
Wow. They named her after. There's two soldiers in the beginning of the game named Biggs and Wedge, and they get teleported off to another universe. And those same exact characters in the same exact clothing show up in Chrono Trigger as like a cameo. So Chrono Trigger has a Final Fantasy connection, but it's not a Final Fantasy game.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. So you said 8 yet?
No, because you don't even have a PS4, so don't even lie.
Even if I had a PS4,
so it's gonna come out on other systems.
Yeah, it'll be.
Yeah, you can, and they're explaining it as they go, so you can totally jump in and play it.
Good, because that's how I know a lot of people would want to do that. If
he's from the future in now a different universe, right? So he has a little cameo in the second villain, like a classic villain, and in the third one, the third, it's from the movies, but it's original Captain Kirk, original Spock, all of them. The original versions of them, original time. Oh, my heart! But if you're not, it's just like, oh, these are old.
The older,
yeah. And that's how it is. That's how it is with played the original Final Fantasy VII. Connections to these characters. If you don't have that, you won't get these like emotional revelations when you're playing the remake because you just don't have that.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. You can totally.
You guys have been waiting for years, haven't they? Didn't they announce this in like 2005? The remake idea.
They did a tech demo.
Right.
For the PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
Where they remade the opening scene of the game, and everyone was like, "Oh shit, are they remaking Final Fantasy VII?" And they weren't. But ever since then, and that was like 2005.
Yeah.
Ever since then, people have been like wanting it, and I've explained this before. I think I explained on the podcast. They did that in 2005, and then in 2013 or 14 at E3, rest in peace E3.
I feel you.
No, Final Fantasy VII.
Oh yeah.
No. 14, yeah. And then they started showing the trailer for it, and everyone was going, "Yeah, oh no," because it turned out to just be a port of the Steam version.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it was coming to PlayStation 4, but it was basically the original version of the game.
Right.
You know? So then in 15, the guy from Sony at the end of E3, after they had announced all this cool shit, right? He's like, "Okay, I know what it is," and then you get to the end of the trailer, and then you hear it. Finally, they are returning. The promise has been made, and you see Cloud walk into frame. And if you watch like a reaction of E3, like everyone's like whispering during the whole thing, like, "Wait, what is this? Is this a movie? Is this the remake? Is this a sequel? What's going on?" And then they walk in, and then it says Final Fantasy. It shows the logo and it says remake. Everyone loses their shit.
I bet.
And that was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So not only was people wanting this for 15 years. 15 years, and 15 years ago the game was only 8 years. So think about that. It's kind of weird, right? not only have people been wanting this for 15 years, it took 10 years for them to announce it, and then still 5 years for the game to come out.
I mean, realistically, because look how many Final Fantasies there are. It's like, when were they ever going to get to it, really? You know what I mean? Throughout the time that from now and then, they've had so many games. It's like, I know you guys you were itching for this remake for so long.
Well, some of it says that the guy who kind of directed it, his name's Tetsu, and then he was also working on Final Fantasy 15, but he left 15 to go finish Kingdom Hearts 3 because he was taking too long on everything. So all of those things had to be done before they could even start on the 7 remake, and then they did, and now they're done. And I think they're just going to roll right into the next one, so they haven't announced when the next one's coming out. But I hope it's not more than a year, because they said, oh, it won't take so long because we can reuse a lot of assets, you know.
They have the engine dialed down, and they have the character models done and everything. So
I'm actually glad that I bought the digital version, because I'm not going to play the second one on my PlayStation 4. I'm going to play that on my PlayStation 5. And I need the game to carry over. I need the save file to carry over, you know? So
which from what they're saying, they will.
Yeah, and you can tell when you're playing it that there's like the way textures are loaded, geometry they're still pretty good.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is 10 years ago, Crysis couldn't actually run 100% on any system.
Right.
They made a game that couldn't
work. Exactly.
On a future computer. And when you're playing Crysis on a normal computer 10 years ago, you can tell like certain things have lower textures, the geometry on stuff, the geometry on things seems very low polygon count even for the time.
Yeah.
Because it'll get upped with high res textures over low, you know. So there's little things like that that make me think that
on Final Fantasy VII, now hearing our discussion,
poor Hector endured you don't sleep. 40 hours to beat it for me, 100%. I mean, if I hadn't
a brand new player that's never played it, I will beat that shit
at all. Not there. But it's just understanding how the magic and the buff and debuff.
This conversation, close it up how you guys think is fit for this Final Fantasy episode.
So I just wanted to have a basic discussion of the game. And the whole stream is going dead because I don't know, the COVID-19 shit.
Oh yeah, sure.
Blame it on the virus. Fucking up across the board.
So so that's our basic discussion of Final Fantasy VII. I'm gonna go in depth on my review on my channel eventually when I get around to it, and that's gonna be my next upload. Come back on my channel on Sunday. I'm gonna do a Stadia show. Hector said he'll be on, so I have to get with him for details. Hector, is there anything going on your channel in the next couple days?
I'm gonna be doomed this week, so if you want to see me get my ass whooped because it's hard as hell and I'm playing it on ultra violence, watch it.
And Maddie, what are you doing on your channel this week?
I don't know, man. I haven't uploaded in months. I've just been live streaming on Friday nights, and that's probably what I'll do. So if you homies want to come hang out and have a good time, Friday night is usually what I do if I'm not too sleepy. That's it. I'm gonna do this thing again.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
All right, and we're out.
And we're out of here. Fuck that fucking episode. Don't ever put me through that again.